Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I wanted to share with you my labor and delivery story. If you have been keeping up with my channel, then you kind of know the whole backstory, that I was overdue and I thought I was gonna go early, and then all of a sudden I just had him. So I kind of wanted to explain the process of my labor and my delivery and how it all went for those of you that kind of want the details. Okay, so I went into my doctor's appointment at 38 weeks and he stripped my membranes and told me that it would be any day, and I was dilated to a 3. So of course I got all excited and I was like, oh my gosh, calling all my family, telling everyone to come down. I started vlogging every day because I knew it was going to happen in like a matter of days, and I just wanted to like capture the moment that we went into labor. And then a whole week went by, and then another half week went by, and I ended up being 40 weeks and 3 days pregnant, going into my doctor's appointment that I scheduled that I never thought I would end up making, which is why it was like such a late appointment, because I was like, oh well, it's fine, I'll deliver before I have to see my doctor again. That wasn't the case. I tried everything to go into labor too, like everything. Okay, maybe not quite everything. I didn't try castor oil, but I tried a lot of stuff. So my doctor's appointment on Friday, 3 days overdue, and last I had heard I was dilated to a 3. So also it was Labor Day weekend. Went into the doctor that morning around 11. I first had a non-stress test. Everything was good there. The only thing was that I had 2 really strong contractions during the non-stress test. So then I went in to see my actual doctor, and he stripped my membranes again, said I was dilated to a 4. Asked me if I wanted to have this baby today, and I said yes. And he's like, okay, so this is the part where it gets super weird. So he's like, okay, go have lunch and then go to labor and delivery. And I was like, okay, so like go tell labor and delivery that you sent me. And he was like, no, go down there, pretend like you're in a lot of pain, hunch over and tell them that you're in labor. And I was like, okay. So it was just like a really weird plan. So we went, we ate lunch, my mom was with me. Then during lunch, I had probably about 2 contractions that were more painful. Up until this point, they weren't really painful yet, so they were kind of painful. The process of him stripping my membranes at this like far dilated, I think can kind of quicken things along. So I think that was kind of the start maybe of me going into labor. But it wasn't anything like, if I were at home, I wouldn't have even thought twice about it. Like they weren't in a pattern, it was nothing. So we go over to labor and delivery, and I'm just like, I walk up and I have like all my makeup on. It's like middle of the day, and she's like, hi, can I help you? And I was like, yeah, I'm in labor. And she's like, okay, fill out this form and then go in the waiting room. So we had to go to the waiting room, and we're like waiting like 20 minutes. The hospital was super busy. And about 20 minutes later, a nurse comes in and she's like, calls my name, and she's like, okay, yeah, your doctor has a room ready for you, or we're getting a room ready for you per your doctor. I was like, okay, cool. So I guess my doctor had kind of called and told them to get me a room. And I kind of assumed like I would go in. Normally every time I've gone into labor and delivery, they put me in triage. Even when my water broke with my firstborn, they put me in triage for a couple hours, then they move you into labor and delivery. So I assumed, can I help you? I'm in the middle of this. So I assumed that it was going to be like a long process. So I called my husband. I was like, you know, first of all, he was like, I'm really busy right now at work. And I'm like, okay, I'm just having a baby over here. But then I was like, okay, you know, it's probably gonna be like a long process. So he's like, all right, well, I'm gonna go to the gym. So he like went to the gym. It was like so weird. It was just like any other day. Like it did not feel like we were having a baby. So we got into the labor and delivery room, and I was like, oh, this is where I'm gonna deliver? And she's like, yeah. So I was like, okay. She's like, you can go ahead and put on your gown. I was like, hold up. Like, I just wasn't expecting it to be like this quick. So I was like, okay, I have like my own personal gown. I've got decorations in the car. So my mom like went out and got everything. And it was just so weird because like I really wasn't in labor yet, you guys. Like it was just normal. So I like put on my cute little gown, my matching pillowcase. My mom's like hanging the decorations, and we're just hanging out in there. David eventually got there, and It was probably about 2 o'clock when we like checked in and everything, and we're just like hanging out, listening to music, like just whatever, like no big deal. My contractions were kind of picking up a little bit, but not too much. So the nurse was like, yeah, I don't really know what your doctor's plan is, but hopefully it's a good one. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure either. Like, cause I was kind of like, am I getting induced? Like, is this an induction? Like, I was just not really sure what was going on. So the nurse checked me and I was still a 4. And when she checked me, it was so painful. And honestly, that's how it's been every time I've had like them check me for my appointments. It's just like really painful. I'm just really sensitive down there. And she was like, so are you getting an epidural? And I was like, I wasn't planning on it. And the reason why I wasn't planning on it was because I had one with my first pregnancy and it fell out, and the pain, it wasn't unbearable because obviously I gave birth and I was fine, but I was just like, what's the point of me like having the epidural and paying for it and all that when I just gave birth naturally the first time? So I was just going to kind of go ahead and skip it if I could bear the pain. And obviously, like if it was like too intense, I would just go ahead and get it. So I wasn't like dead set on not having one, but I really wanted to try to do it all natural this time. So I told her that, and she was like, well, it would make your exams a lot easier. So like every time they come in to check me, it would just make things a lot smoother if I wasn't in pain, because she could tell I was like wincing just doing that. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna think about it. And then they got the news that my doctor had called and said he was gonna come down and break my water after he was done with his patients for the day. And I'm like, okay. So they showed me like the tool that he uses. It's like a little like crochet stick that just sticks up there and breaks my water. So that's when I was like, can I get that epidural before he does that? And the nurse was like, yeah, of course. So I decided to go ahead and get an epidural, even though I wasn't in any pain. Sorry, my dogs. My husband's outside with them. So the anesthesiologist, I think that's what they're called, came in, gave me the epidural, and then I started feeling really good. Like it was pretty numb and I wasn't feeling much, but I could still like lift my legs and like do things, but it was like the perfect amount. And he did a really good job. And I told him like my concerns with it and like why I didn't really want it necessarily. So I don't know, he just did a really good job regardless. So I had that done. Then around 6 p.m. my doctor came in and broke my water and told me that he had to leave and go out of town for the weekend for a family emergency, but this other doctor would be delivering me. And this other doctor, when I was in triage a couple months ago at 33 weeks when my dog jumped on me, this is the doctor that took care of me then. So I had already like known this doctor, and he's also delivered my friend's babies, and so I was super excited that he was going to be my doctor. I would have, of course, loved to have my doctor, but if I had to have an alternative, at least it was someone that I already knew. So I was like, okay, that's totally fine. So he was just like, good luck, and he left. And then this new doctor came in and he checked me. Oh, and I was a 5 when he broke my water. So he came in, he checked me and everything, and he was like, okay, he told the nurses, he's like, this is her second baby and she has an epidural, so things might move really quick and she might not realize it. So you just need to keep a close eye on her. And so that's when the nurse, I think she had like 2 patients, me and someone else, so she just had me at that point because they wanted to make sure that I wasn't gonna like pop out a baby really quick, which is basically what happened. So I probably like 15, 20, 30 minutes after he broke my water, they checked me again, and I was a 7.5. So I went from a 5 to a 7.5 within like a half an hour, and I never had Pitocin or anything like that. Oh, one thing, rewind a little bit. I did have to have antibiotics because I was GBS positive, and when you're pregnant, they take a test to see if you are group B strep or group beta strep positive or negative. If you're positive for it, it's really not a big deal as long as they get antibiotics in you 4 hours before you deliver. So she had asked me if I was, and I said, I don't think so. I wasn't with my first, and they never told me anything this time, so I don't think so. And she checked my chart, and I was. So I had gotten tested for it, and they never told me that I was positive. which is kind of crazy. I'm glad that she double checked for me. So she did put an IV. I had to have an IV anyways because they put a lot of fluid in you. Like, I think it's just, I don't know, water. I'm not really sure, but they put fluid in you anyways. So I already had an IV. Then they just deposited antibiotics through the IV. So they did that for me. So that way baby can get them and he doesn't get sick. And they put an IV right here, and I was like, it's so painful. It's so painful. So she's like, okay, well, I'll have someone else come in and do another one. So then they put another one in this part of my wrist, and that one was even more painful. And then she decided to keep them both just in case I needed an extra IV for any sort of emergency. So then I ended up having 2 IVs in my arm, and they were both so painful. Literally the only pain I felt my entire delivery was my IVs. So anyways, back to where I was. So they had checked me after he broke my water, and I was a 7.5, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Like, how is this happening? I wasn't even in labor. And now here we are, a 7.5. Then they checked me again. I was an 8.5. They're like, do you feel pressure? And I did feel kind of pressure down there. So I'd just be like, I feel pressure. And then they'd check me, and then I was another like full centimeter dilated. So it happened all really, really quickly. The dilation from going from a 5, having my water broken, to going to basically a 9.5 within an hour, I'd say, or less. I don't really know the exact time frame. He broke my water sometime after 6 p.m. and I delivered at 7:48 p.m. So that's how quickly it moved. So they, one part they wanted me to lay down on different positions on my side, just to, I'm not really sure why they had me do that, but his heart rate started to drop in one of those positions. So they put oxygen on me, and they kind of just left it on until I was ready to push, just to make sure he was getting enough air and everything, since I was progressing so fast. They didn't want him to be in any stress. So yeah, they checked me again, and I was a 9.5, and then the doctor came in, and this was all like super, super fast. And he's like, yeah, you're ready to start pushing. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So they set everything up. He has me do a practice push, and he was like, yeah, you need a refresher on how to push. I totally forgot, I guess. I was like pushing like, and like, I guess you're supposed to like hold your breath in, and they were like, pick up your knees and bear down and push, and like hold your breath and push out. And I was like, okay. So I did it like that, and they were like, okay, you're ready to go. And I remember thinking while I was pushing, the only thing that hurt were those stupid IVs, because I had to lift up my legs and the IV was like poking me, and I was like, oh, this IV. But the pushing part was fine. And with my first, I pushed for 3 hours. So this time I had a contraction, and then they had me push, and I requested a big mirror that's like on a stand, and so I could see everything down there. And I highly recommend this, because I had this with my first labor, and it helps so much, because when you're pushing and you can see your baby's head coming out, then you just push harder, because you're like, oh my gosh, I see him, and then you just push him out. Versus if you're just like staring at the ceiling, you like don't really know what's going on down there, and you're like, yeah, I'm pushing. But like when you can see your baby, you just know to push harder. So I had the mirror, and the first contraction was 3 pushes, and not much happened. And I was like, oh, I like immediately had that like feeling like this is gonna take forever. So then the next contraction was like, all of a sudden I could see his head coming out, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So again, 3 pushes, and then they all were like, okay, next contraction, you got this. And I'm like, okay. And then next contraction, sure enough, I just pushed him right out, and I like saw the whole thing, and it was just so magical. And it was like, it was just so weird. Like it just like opened up, and he just came right out, and like I didn't feel any pain. It was so crazy. And so those 3 contractions happened within 8 minutes. So I only pushed for 8 minutes, and it was amazing. He came out, and it was just beautiful. I have my labor and delivery video where you can see like all of that. Obviously not him coming out, but you can see pretty much everything. And then the doctor handed me my baby, and normally he delivered my placenta, and I was super curious. I had to have him show me all of that and stuff. And then normally they like stitch you all up and do all this stuff, but he was like, you're good. You don't have any tears, you don't have any swelling, you're ready to go. So I was like, okay, like I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel like I just had a baby. I just felt totally normal, like the same, like it was like just the weirdest day. Like I never even like had a point where I was like, I'm in labor. Like it was just like the easiest day ever. It was so weird. I'm so thankful. I'm just like, I can't believe that it just happened so easily like that. I know it does not happen like that for everyone. But with it being my second, maybe, he did tell me if I do have future babies, they're going to come really fast. So that's good to know. But yeah, it was just really, really wonderful. And then going back up to the hospital room, like I felt so good and so normal. And I remember with my first son, I had like tucks and dermoplasts and like all that stuff. And I totally stocked up on all that stuff this time thinking I would need it. I didn't need any of that. I had no problems, no stinging, no burning, no tears, nothing down there. I peed normally. I also, TMI, I went poop normally right away in the hospital. They were like, they gave me stool softeners and I was like, not sure if I needed them or not, but I just took them because they gave them to me. I did not need them. If you don't think you need stool softeners, you don't need to take them because that made it a lot worse than it should have been. I ended up having like diarrhea, sorry. But yeah, I did not need the stool softeners. I did not need any sort of like medicine. And then I also had like painkillers with my first pregnancy, Percocet. And all they had me have this time was Motrin and like Tylenol or ibuprofen. I don't know, something like that. So it was just like totally different experience. Can walk around normal. I'd say the most pain that I was in postpartum was just the contractions from breastfeeding, like when your uterus is contracting back down to its original size. I'm 4 days postpartum today as I'm filming this, and I'm not really in much pain. I had a little bit of lower back pain where the epidural was, and then I'm just like a little bit like achy and sorry, kind of just, you know, like I gave birth. But it's not really that bad. So that is my labor and delivery story. I hope that this helps you. Maybe it'll help you not be scared because there are some really, really easy deliveries and there are also some really, really hard deliveries and there are scary deliveries. You just never know, but just go into it with an open mind and just relax, have fun with it. You know, we had a lot of fun doing it, like all the decorations, like everything just kind of makes it that extra special moment. So thank you guys for watching and I will talk to you in my next video. Bye. Oh, and of course I can't end it without showing you guys my precious little bundle of joy. This is baby Crew. He's just resting.